Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're tuning into this episode. We are a viewer and listener supported podcast, so we really appreciate you listening, watching on YouTube. We really encourage you to subscribe to whatever platform you're using. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or if you're on Apple or however you listen to a podcast, be sure and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. Also, make comments if you like it and share it if you like it. We really need people to make comments and share the episodes that you like. And then also, if you're not already a supporter, we really would encourage you to go to spiritualityadventures.com and you can pick a tier, and we have bonus content for every type of giver. This is a nonprofit, so they're tax-deductible donations, but we do provide bonus content for those who are supporters. So be a part of the team, help support Spirituality Adventures, and we're so glad you're tuning into this episode.
Excellent.
Okay. Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. Glad you're tuning into this episode. I am excited to have an interview with Frances Story. Frances, welcome to Spirituality Adventures.
Hey, thanks for having me, Fred. I'm excited to be here.
And we've just met recently. I'll tell a little backstory. I have a friend, Eric Vigentic, who has been, I think, attending your writer's workshop now for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, he's one of the staple members.
Yeah, and he's been in a group of mine and used to go to a church that I pastored, and so we've been friends a long time. And he's literally for 4 years, I bet he's been saying, you've got to come to this writer's workshop, meet Frances and all this. And yeah, and I always wanted to. It wasn't like, I was just busy, and so finally it happened. And then I actually attended one of your workshops so far, but I'm putting it on my Wednesday calendar when I'm in town. So like by the way, I don't know when this will release, but this is a Tuesday, April 30th, last day of April. So I'll be there tomorrow night at Bees.
Fantastic.
But everybody, Frances Story, formerly known as poet Jen Harris.
Yes.
Poet, a writer, a performance artist, a recovery coach. She's been on NPR, TEDx, Queer Eye, which is one of my favorite programs. I can't tell you how many times I've cried on a Queer Eye show. Oh my gosh. Anyway, Pride Awards. I mean, an amazing thing. So we had coffee, and me and Eric and Frances. And then I also found out that you're currently editing a book for a friend of mine. I've been on his podcast and he's been on my podcast. And so anyway, there were just a lot of fun connections. Plus I have multiple friends in the queer community, like Calvin Arsenia, I said, hey, I just had coffee with Frances Story, and he was so excited. I'm so glad you met Frances. So anyway, so thank you for being here and connecting with us.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to be here. It's a small world, isn't it? So thank you for having me.
You bet. I always like to get a little bit of an origin story, backstory. And man, yours is so, oh my gosh, you've been through so much. I'm just so amazed at your ability to persist and overcome, and your resilience. Oh my goodness. So let's dive into whatever you're comfortable sharing of your, like where you were born, where you grew up, kind of your family, any spirituality or orientation in your family history, and whatever you want to share about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you for the tenderness and the empathy. Man, life is so good. It's hard to, I don't know, go back and look at anything other than leading me right to where I'm at. So I'm very grateful, and I'm pretty wily and unruly in that way. So I feel like every time I go to the desert and I see like a really thriving scenery, I'm like, I get it. I grew up, I was born on a military base in Florida. I grew up in the South, and then we moved to Italy for a few years. My dad was in the Air Force, came back to the States, wound up in Kansas by way of Oklahoma. I've recently done a ton of research on my family and found out that we're like the first people to wind up in the Midwest, but that, I don't know, since early 1700s, I've had family in Wisconsin. So that's kind of crazy. I mean, it's not crazy to anybody but me, but yeah. So I grew up in the military. We moved around a lot. My dad got out of the military when I was, beginning middle school. And my folks moved to a dairy farm that had about half a dozen or more greenhouses. My mom ran these greenhouses. She sold flowers and they farmed vegetables all year round. There was a pig farm and thousands of acres of corn. And so when my dad wasn't working shifts as a cop, he was working on this dairy farm. And then eventually it employed all of us kids. I have two younger siblings. My folks, I don't think my mother wasn't very religious per se. She didn't grow up religious, but my folks embraced the Southern Baptist experience pretty early in my life. So, which is just, it's always been tough for me. I'm not exactly a rule following personality. I don't like being told what to do. Everybody who's into Enneagrams, I've been forced to get into Enneagrams with all the Christians around me. So I'm an 8. Okay. I hear. So I have a tendency to challenge everything, which is incredibly true about me. But I don't know. I was raised Southern Baptist, and my dad was the head of the household, and I was like, why? I don't have a lot of I don't have a lot of respect for rules that don't have any logic behind them. I'm not big into frameworks that are in the shape of a hierarchy. Just not my thing. Yeah, so constantly in a state of conflict. And then, wouldn't you know it, I am gay, which was a big beef with the Southern Baptist environment. So my folks took that really hard, and they made they made some decisions that were very much enforced by the pulpit that kind of left me on my own for a few years, and I don't know, I used to tell that story in a lot more detail, but I wrote 3 books about it, and, I got it out of my system, and my folks have done a lot of growing and developing an examination of their own beliefs, and they're incredibly supportive of me now. And, they bought my youngest stepson an awesome birthday present, and they're here for all the holidays, and they love my wife. And it's just, we've come a long way, but awesome. The church really made that difficult for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. The pain that has been, dished out through all of that. I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
How old were you when you left home?
I was 16. I wanted to go as much as they were like, right. I was ready to start my life, and, I don't know. I found high school to be a big waste of time. I graduated, and I loved everything about writing. So I was always writing. I was in every possible writing environment. But I don't know, junior and senior year, I had work release. I had a couple of jobs. I wanted to buy a car and just get the hell out of there. I couldn't find any place for me in that. And I wanted to go start my big writer's life. So I moved in with my girlfriend, I don't know, a couple of miles away from my folks. And it was another year before her mother found out that we were gay. And then her mom kicked me out. And I spent a few years being homeless, couch surfing, living in hotels. I just wasn't very stable. I worked when I was 19, I worked full time at a McDonald's overnight, which is its own hell. Overnight shifts are awful. McDonald's is a terrible place to work. And, I made $775 a month working 40 hours a week. I don't know how anybody's supposed to survive on that. So it was, and that's pretty much how it is now. Like you can't make a living wage working at any place that somehow sells 1 billion hamburgers plus a year, somehow you still can't make a living, which is really depressing. But I came from blue collar people and I didn't really know what I wanted to do except write. And there was no real direct path for that. So I've taken the long way.
Yeah. So you're a recovery coach. So
I'm trained in recovery. I have a lot of perspective and insight. I'm exploring my own sobriety at a greater depth than I ever have, but I don't necessarily, I utilize that information to support people where they are, especially when they come to my writing workshops. But I don't actively coach anybody in recovery because of my own obscure nature to it.
Yeah. What, did you start using pretty young? Was that a part of your early story?
Oh man, I've loved drugs as long as I could get a hold of drugs. I don't want to pretend like that's not true.
Right. I got saved when I was 16, at a Southern Baptist youth camp. And, so Jesus saved me from sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It just turns out that I still like them all. So anyway.
That's it. I think that there were a lot of things that nobody knew. The beauty of our current existence, if you have the privilege to access it, is that therapy is a remarkable thing, that we have a lot of language around, neurodivergence, and we have a lot of language around empathic people, and we have a lot of language for cognitive behavioral needs. There's a lot of therapy, and I've been in an extensive amount of therapy the last 20 years to really get to know myself and undo a lot of the damage that I inherited from people who didn't mean to give it to me in the first place, right? But I was I don't know, 13 when Metabolife became the way in which everybody could lose weight over the counter, and I grew up with a mom who drank Slim Fast and was trying to just, keep it tight. And Metabolife was my first drug, which of course those men are in prison now because that stuff was legalized meth. But I think it set me on a hard road. And also, I didn't have any skills to process the rejection of being queer in your community, of losing your church and your family and feeling no sense of belonging. And nobody was really talking about stuff like that, and they didn't talk about what it was like to turn on the TV and hear your second class existence being debated behind a pulpit. They didn't talk about what it was like to watch Don't Ask, Don't Tell go into effect or to fall. They didn't ask what it was like to experience DOMA or experience people just debating whether or not you were an abomination or comparing your innate sexuality to bestiality. That kind of stuff messes you up. And, the kids that I teach, the kids that I'm around now are, they have a varied pronouns and, they're allowed to be whoever they are in their sexual orientations. And I love that for them. And I ache for that for the younger me, because if I'd just been allowed to be who I was, I probably could get 10 years of my life back at least.
Yeah. Yeah. I am interviewing today, right after you, a little later today, a gal named Tina Shermer Sellers, who wrote a book called Sex, God, and the Conservative Church, because she started getting kids from the purity culture into her. She's a family and sex therapist who presented like they'd been abused, but honestly had just grown up in a shame-based sexual environment.
Yeah.
How that have impacted. So I'm interviewing on her newest book called Shameless Parenting. And it's literally a guide to help parents go through all of these kind of issues you just named, basically with their kids from birth to 18 and the developmental phases, how to have conversations appropriately at each age, how to include all of our sexuality and all the diversity and fluidity of our sexuality and gender and all that stuff. So
it's so important. I'm so glad that you're having her on.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. And oh my goodness. So I listened to a lot of your, the things that you had on your website. And one of the things that I picked up on was evidently you were in San Francisco, kind of in the throes of sort of, your addictive lifestyle or whatever you want to call all of that, your exploration of life and yourself and relationships. And you're in San Francisco, and evidently you went to a slam poetry event, and you say it kind of saved you. It changed your life. Can you kind of give us the context for how does slam poetry save your life? Strong of a way to say.
No, that's exactly what happened.
Or something. Yeah.
I have, and I feel like everybody has this, but I don't know if everybody has this. It's just my hope. There's always been a voice in me that knows what I need to be doing. There's always been a voice in me that is determined to survive, something that speaks when I don't want to hear it. And it's like, you have to change. You have to stop. You have to get out of here. You have to move now, immediately. And not necessarily across the country. It could be, this place is dangerous. My intuition is really strong and it's very unignorable. So I was in San Francisco. I was just in the midst of some really unhealthy experiences. Everywhere I looked, there was addiction. Everybody I knew was addicted to something or many somethings. And, also going to work and raising kids. And it was just like, I don't know, when you're looking around and your behavior seems normal, but internally, like, man, this is not the way a person should be living. Like, I'm clearly like hiding something, coping with something. I just knew I needed help and I didn't know where to get it. So I was introduced to Andrea Gibson on YouTube in YouTube's infancy. And Andrea Gibson is a queer poet who really, as far as modern slam poetry goes, is very much one of the OGs. And their performance made me weep. So I immediately went to look for slam poetry, found out, of course, Berkeley and San Francisco are just like homes of these places, right? So I went to the first time I went, not the first time I performed, but the first time I went to the Starry Plow in Berkeley, and the MC Dre, whom I ran into when I was on tour a few years ago. And, he saved my life. He said, this is a church for people who don't have one. And that broke me wide open. I never went to church for the messaging per se. I feel like God is everywhere and I'm part of everything. God is everything. But I needed somebody to remind me that I was part of everything. I think that is the beginning of my journey in the direction of sobriety as well, to be reminded that I am not outside of, that I'm not other, that I'm not cast out in any way. So Dre said that, and I was like, this is what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing, and that was 2013. So it's been 11 years, but it might as well have been 3 lifetimes ago. It changed me. That message comes up all the time. It's the bedrock of the environments that I create for other people. It's the way in which I try to lead community. I'm a pretty natural born leader, and I have a magnetism to me. I know that about myself. And I know that in the way I can sell out a room and the way my workshops are full. It's not, I don't think people are coming for me, but I know I can make people feel safe and welcome. And I do it with a very sincere intentionality of, you're welcome here. You're wanted here. You're safe here as you are, period. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to be a part of community with you. And that started because Dre offered that to me.
I love that. I love that. So there's one other thing I want to kind of dive into.
Yeah.
Ask, because I've been in recovery for, my sobriety date would start September of 2019. I got addicted to Xanax and alcohol for about 2.5 years. Went to rehab, lost my job, lost my career, felt like my faith was shattered, all that kind of stuff. So I've been in the recovery world now for quite a while. But one of the things that caught my attention about your story was that you were misdiagnosed, if I'm understanding correctly. You were misdiagnosed as what, bipolar 2?
Yeah.
And then like they were trying to medicate you for that, and it turns out it's a misdiagnosis. How did that was interesting to me, because working in the recovery world, every week of my life I hang out with alcoholics and addicts, every week.
Yeah.
Me being one of them. So anyway, yeah. I was just curious about that. I haven't heard that story that many times about a misdiagnosis and how that negatively impacted your life, and then how you found out that wasn't the case and you needed something else for healing. Right.
Well, I think that the telltale sign of a misdiagnosis at any age, because they diagnosed me at 15. First of all, nobody is a whole person with a whole brain at 15. So I work with kids who have really, whose diagnoses are meant to give them a label to make the world easier for them to exist in, right? I was 15, diagnosed as bipolar because I was impulsive, because I was drug seeking, because I was defiant. But nobody was like, what's happening in the home that's causing these things? What's happening in society that's causing these things? I mean, I had no emotional awareness of how to process my burgeoning sexuality, except that I must be like possessed by a demon, right? Like if I'm gay, something's wrong with me. Mm-hmm. That creates a lot of shame and fear and self-rejection. And, you have to live with that, but you can't really live with that. So you're going to medicate that, right? Anytime there's shame and otherness, you can be certain that person is not part of a welcoming community, because if they were, this wouldn't be the experience that they're having. Mm-hmm. Also, I don't know a 15-year-old who isn't impulsive, but that's another story for another day. This counselor, I don't even know if they were an actual therapist. I assume they might have been, but this counselor diagnosed me as bipolar 2, and immediately they started to medicate me. And I spent all of my junior year of high school in a haze, just like all these different medications, lithium, at all. I can't even remember most, trazodone, all these things that just make you a zombie. And my belief is that if you should be taking a medication, it should be improving your life, not disconnecting you from your humanity. So I took them because I was supposed to take them, and it might have been, I don't know, it was maybe a year later where I was just like, I feel like I should be getting better by now, right? And because I know people who have a bipolar diagnosis, and because I have lost people who had a bipolar diagnosis, I understand this is a fine line. So I'm not in any way speaking to anybody else's medical condition, right? Solely my own. Yep. The medication never worked for me. It didn't fix anything. It didn't make me a more functional part of society. It just erased me, and I was kind of disembodied for about a year. And then, this country hates us. So I didn't have health care. So I couldn't get medication if I wanted to. And I stopped taking it, and life was awful. Again, like you're making impulsive or reckless decisions. Well, it's because you're homeless and you don't have any money, even if you're working full time, to feed yourself. Like you make chaotic choices, or, you don't have any financial literacy, so you don't behave in a financially literate way, right? Like I look back on that version of myself, and I feel a deep empathy for her because she didn't know what she didn't know. But I just struggled and struggled and struggled. And I kept trying to, anytime there was a free therapy program, I would attend it, try to get some help, try to get some perspective. The conversation of mental health really started to, enter my life around the same time that slam poetry did. And it was in 2017 that I was in the last of my abusive relationships, and obviously not the person that I married. Just want to be clear about that. Mental health conversation was everywhere. And I just realized that like my life had to change, or I was going to be suffering the consequences of all of this chaos forever. So I got a trauma therapist. Expanded Medicaid is a gift. And that gift in my poverty gave me the opportunity to go to trauma therapy and to go to trauma therapy and hear that bipolar 2 and complex post-traumatic stress disorder have a tremendous amount of overlapping features.
Yeah.
Right. And there are very few singular identifying that are specific to just that diagnosis. And then I started working with homeless teenagers in Denver, and we would bring them into this center that we had and feed them, and then they would do writing prompts, just trying to process what was going on with them out on the streets, and just give them some insight into their own experience. Also keep them safe for a couple hours, and in seeing them, there was so much about myself that I was like, I haven't dealt with this. I haven't healed this. This part of me is really damaged and broken, and I need more help. So I kept getting more help. I've done all sorts of, new age experimental therapies. I've, far beyond just sitting around and talking about what's going on inside of me. But I got a complex post-traumatic stress diagnosis, which technically isn't in the DSM-5, but it's sitting there on the brink of full-scale acceptance. And it just changed my life. It gave me an opportunity to look at myself as somebody who had withstood a significant amount of trauma and was impacted by it on a very fundamental level, versus somebody who was struggling with a mental health disorder that no matter what they did was never going to get any better.
Yeah.
Because I know people who are bipolar and medicated who got better when they got medicated. That's and great.
Dear friends. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's just, I went to a conference once where the presenting psychologist said, we used to diagnose first, discuss later, meaning they'd have you in there for, one session, maybe two, and then they'd be like, I know what's wrong with you. Here's the medication. I'll see you every week for the next however long. Right. And that's what happened to me. It's the turn of the century, unregulated science. And it did me a lot of harm before it finally did me some good.
Interesting.
But I knew it was wrong, and I fought back against it for a long time because the stigma, especially in the early 2000s, was enormous. And nobody would take me seriously because I had this diagnosis. Every time they flipped my chart open, they were like, something's wrong with you. Oh, here it is. Now I know that also has a lot of things to do with being a woman and being a queer, especially because I've been a lot more queer presenting in my life than I suppose I am now. But I just wanted to be believed.
Mm. Mm. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Man, wow. Yeah, I think of, trauma-informed therapy. The two therapy models that helped me the most were DBT, dialectical therapy, which is more of a cognitive-based therapy, but has a mindful meditation component to it, which that's what got me into mindful meditation stuff. And I'm doing a 2-year training with Tara Brach and Jack Kornfield in mindful meditation, which comes out of the Buddhist tradition. But anyway, and then the other one was IFS, which is internal family systems, which is kind of based on the psychotherapy model. Richard Schwartz founded it. There's been Hillary Jacob Hindle has a book called It's Not Always Depression. And she writes a lot about what you just described, how there's been so many misdiagnoses. She's a professional therapist, but comes out of that IFS model and how trauma many times is at the heart of some of these issues versus what you've just described. And obviously everybody's story is different. You have to dive into it, but thanks for sharing that. I think there's a lot of people out there who are dealing with trauma and it gets misdiagnosed. I think that's not uncommon.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's where that's where you have to do the work, whether you like it or not. Right. You have no control over the suffering that you endured, but you have every control over the life you live going forward. And, that's the balance that I grant myself all the time. Internal family systems. My wife introduced me to that modality, and I think it's extraordinary, right? Like that's a whole thing I haven't even been able to get into yet that I'm so deeply interested in, because it does explain triggers, right? And how they become, and there's always something behind the door. And I think that IFS is going to really change the world in that way. The best therapy I ever had was neurofeedback therapy. And that I lived in Oregon during the pandemic. And again, expanded Medicaid is a gift because you can get all the therapy you need, even if you can't afford it. And they hook all these monitors up to your head, and it's not sending anything in there.
I've never done this, by the way.
Oh, okay. It's wild. So they hook all these monitors up to you, and you're like, I'm watching a computer screen, and it's just like Netflix. Like, I don't know, animal shows. I love things about any animal. And it's training your brain. So if you are watching the show and your brain is just cooperating, cool, you can see the screen. But if your brain is trying to go offline, the screen starts to fuzz out, gray out, blur out. And your brain, I call it's like driving in the ditch and being pulled back up to the main road. So when you live in a state of hypervigilance or deep anxiety, where you just be sitting around and then all of a sudden you're kind of seized by panic or stress, fear, unnecessarily so, not instinctually so, it retrains your brain. Athletes use this to create a really sharp focus. Like Olympians are using this. People who are, so zeroed in on the task at hand. It's not just their physical body that they're training. It is their mentality and their mind, right? But this is working without medication, without ever having to take anything. I trained the hypervigilance right out of me. I couldn't sleep in the dark before that. I couldn't walk, or I couldn't be in my own home at any given time without checking the locks half a dozen times. Like I got myself out of the ditch and back on the main road with that kind of therapy.
Interesting. What do you say the name of that therapy again?
It's called neurofeedback therapy.
Okay. All right. That's cool. Maybe I think now I'm thinking I need to do that too.
I haven't been to any of the centers in Kansas City, but I know there are a couple. And, like I said, I think anything that you're willing to try for, 3 to 4 sessions to see if you have any benefit on it. I'm all about it, because I'd like to be the best version of myself while I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I went to your workshop, just once so far, but I'm looking forward to jumping in again because I don't consider myself a great writer. In fact, I never even considered myself a creative type, even though I'd started a church and built a huge mega church and I was preaching all the time. But the first time I started thinking myself as a creative was a little book that came out by a guy named Austin Kleon called Steal Like an Artist.
Love that book.
And I went through that and I ended up buying boxes of them and just giving them away to people because I loved it so much. And then recently in in this last 5 years of meltdown and, recreating Fred kind of thing, I came across Julia Cameron's book. What is it? The Artist's Way. I think it's a class.
Yeah.
And
morning pages will change your life.
I've been doing morning pages now, literally faithfully for almost 5 years now.
That's amazing.
So then I'm going to start going to your workshop and I'm writing a memoir right now. And I have a lot of book projects going around in my brain. So a part of connecting with you, I think, is a bit of a godsend or a universe send or however you want to describe that. But no, I'm excited about it. But I love the way you opened the session with the writer's workshop. It's kind like I was new there. It was a really packed room in this small coffee shop down on Southwest Boulevard in Kansas City. Those of you who are Kansas City people, and the place was packed out. And I loved the opening, because when I screwed up and meltdown and I was on the front pages of the Kansas City Star, megachurch pastor goes to rehab, and I had a 2-page article on me. I was an addict, an alcoholic, and an adulterer. So I was like, that's exactly what I wanted to be known for my whole life, and
right.
And so I'm in this whole meltdown phase. And the only place that I found church was in the recovery hall of being totally vulnerable and honest and real about everything they'd ever done, kind of a deal. And that vulnerability and honesty is what I needed to heal myself. Because I had been so ashamed of anything that I'd ever thought that I shouldn't think or shouldn't feel or shouldn't this or shouldn't that. A lot of it was around my sexuality, but I'd been raised to think that like any sexual thought that I had was like sin, tell a 16-year-old kid. And I took that seriously. So I spent the next 40 years of my life trying not to think anything sexual, and all these kind of things. And so then when you opened the room up, can you give us a feel for like your opening line? I could tell you'd done it 1,000 times, right? You're orienting new people like me to this group of people, and you're trying to keep it safe for everybody that's already there. Give us that intro. Cause for me, like you described the guy, when you went to the slam poetry thing, he says, this is a church for people who don't have church. And when you opened with your opening, that's how I felt. And I loved it. I love it. So give us that. And then I love the honesty and the vulnerability that came out through the writers. But I want to give people a feel for what you did in that room and what I experienced with the writers' prompts. But the first was the opening. You're orienting people to a safe community. Give us that talk here real quick. I mean, just the quick opening.
It's I like to welcome people to the writing workshop KC. We are known as an aggressively vulnerable group. This is a space where the center can hold. The trigger warning is implied because this is real life. What I hope for people in this space is that there is no genre, there is no word count. Your internal critic and editor can take the night off. You are invited to come as you are and be as you are and just offer yourself up to the page. I offer people writing prompts. If they want to write on them, let all your wild horse loose. And if you hate the prompts, don't write them. I don't care. Just be here in this creative space and allow yourself to show up and be seen. You know, my fundamental rule of this workshop is that there is no hierarchy. This is a web. This is a community. We are each responsible for what we bring to this space. And, you know, in the 5 years now that I've been running it, very few times, I mean, less than a handful of times have I asked people not to return. And the basis of that is that we have a very specific set of community agreements that before you come to my class, you are expected to read and abide. And those include not trying to fix anything for anybody. There's no invitation to pry into somebody's life. You get to know them as much as they allow you to know them on the page. And you are not welcome to deep dive into somebody's vulnerabilities. You have to be present. You have to sit with what they have offered you, right? In doing that, you get to know each other in really tender ways, really quickly. And you leave, I hope, with an affirmation of being whole as you are. Mm. You know, my final rule before I ever kick anything off is don't be an asshole. And that rule is, I think it works because it's very universal. Whatever that means to you, don't be that. And so far, so good, right? People are really good at self-monitoring and offering feedback and insight into the work that they share in this space. That's very much about the writer and not about themselves, but also unites a common humanity.
Mm. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Was there something specific that I said that you felt like touched by?
Well, I honestly, so what it felt like to me was what I had experienced in the recovery world, in the 12-step world, with the vulnerability and honesty, but moved into a writer's workshop is how it felt to me. And so because I've been in the recovery world for 4.5 years, I felt at home instantly in that kind of the way you set it up. So
that makes my heart so happy. You know, my wife is a sober person and she's been sober about the same length of time as you. And I think it's so important. It's important to know that you are loved as you are, that you are okay, that I am okay, that we are not the worst things we have ever done or the people that we have hurt. We are a collection of our experiences and we all want to be seen in the best light. I want people to come to workshop and know that I can't make it any better. And I hope that this brings something to their lives that they didn't have when they showed up tonight.
Yeah.
But they're giving it to themselves. I'm just facilitating it.
Yeah. I get emotional about that.
That's beautiful. It's important because you know how far you've walked, right? You know how far you've come. I know how far I've come. I should be dead 6 times over.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And if people judged me by the decisions I made in moments of my lowest forms of humanity, nobody would ever want to know me. But I am more than the choices I have made. And I am trying to make better choices all the time. And I hope that for all of us, we deserve to be happy and fulfilled.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So you've been working with people for years now, trying to help bring out their creativity. And it's more than just becoming a good writer, right? It's more, right. But you've helped mentor or coach or just come alongside people in a way to help them discover their creativity, their generativity, their beauty, what they have to put out in the world that comes from who they are at their deepest place of their being. And then to give places of honesty and vulnerability to share that and a community to nurture that. When, like, I feel it, like I was sitting there, you gave, I think, 3 prompts. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I can't even remember, like one of them was you could only write 4 words per sentence or something like that. So it was like poetry. And so I felt so insecure, like just trying to do what you were asking for the prompts. Cause it's not the way I normally write, but I just plowed into it. And then I listened to other people read their stuff. Right. And so I was thinking, man, I don't want to read, like I'm a kind of an introvert. I was a shy kid who ended up feeling called to be a pastor and had to learn to overcome my performance anxiety. And I still get anxious every time I speak to even 10 people. Right. And so, anyway, I found it fascinating that I think everybody's creative. I think that's something, I think it's akin to our spirituality and connection and belonging. And I define spirituality as either connection or belonging to self, to others, and to something greater than us. And I don't try to put any more labels on it than that, but something about connection and belonging. And I think there's so much creativity in people that's untapped, I guess. Mm-hmm. And
absolutely,
tapping into that and helping people discover that. What are give us some of your perspective on that and how to help people tap into their creative side and what they have to bring to the world through beauty and creativity. How do you do that? I can see,
I'm not big. I'm not big on gendering God, right? Like because I don't know. I don't need a corporal punishment father, and I don't want to put any more pressure on women to be, the divine deliverers of things. But the creativity is the most spiritual expression, in my humble and direct opinion. I cannot get away from the beauty of the world. And I'm a pretty cynical person. I want to say even extroverts get performance anxiety about speaking, right? And I don't know that I feel like a very introverted person in that the truest version of me is quiet and reflective and requires a lot of alone time. But the nature of me is very loud and boisterous and pushy and, has a hard time knowing when to shut up. So it's a delicate balance for me. All that to say, every moment of every day, there is something beautiful. There is something beautiful. There's something beautiful in a person, in a place, in the sky, in the ground, in a crack in a sidewalk. Something is beautiful. And I don't think that has anything to do with my perspective. The world is beautiful. And creativity is inherent to us all. But especially and specifically in a capitalistic culture, if it does not serve to make money, we deprioritize it.
Yeah.
And, just like anything else that you put down and don't return to, it loses its value. It loses its meaning and you lose your connection with it. I was listening to previous episodes where you were talking about specifically the one that you just had with Victoria about nature, right?
I love that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And just I grew up in a lot of places, but I was kind of forced into the realities of agriculture and nature by way of my parents working on a dairy farm and suddenly seeing life cycles of birth and death in ways that I'd never seen them before. I didn't grow up on a farm. I just was kind of dumped on a farm. And I suddenly realized how lacking my life had been for that kind of connection with nature, for that kind of understanding of truly the miracle of our existence here. Mm-hmm. All that to say, I believe creativity belongs to everybody. And I believe that community is the true opposite of addiction.
Interesting.
So if I can offer creativity in community,
Yes. Ooh,
I can't think of anything more spiritual.
I love that. That
It feels
I
important.
like that contrast. Yeah. Because, addiction and isolation tend to go hand in hand, right? I mean, eventually your addiction drives you to isolation.
Well, that's it. And if I hadn't felt so isolated in the first place, I probably wouldn't have become addicted to things. But I felt so alone. And this is what comforted me. This is what made me, it's not about the chemical reaction of addiction, right? It's feeling something or it's feeling nothing. Whichever one of those you need to get to, that's what addiction's about. Or at least it was for me. I had a propensity for uppers. So I wanted to feel something that wasn't just being sad all the time. Right. So connecting people with their inherent sense of worth, letting them look down and go, it might have been 6 words, maybe it was 300, but I did that. I made that. I have value here. I have voice here. Everybody in this room is equal. Everything we've all written and shared, if you choose to share, was done in 10 minutes. And some people are at the gym of writing every day and they spit out things in 10 minutes that I cannot believe it was possible to create. And some of us get 15 words and that's all we have. Writing in its craft is a muscle, but creativity in its origin, it belongs to everybody and it belongs to nobody. And it's always there for you. And that's what I want to believe is true about God.
Me too.
Good. I'm glad we found each other.
In 2019, so I've got degrees in God, right? I've got bachelor's and master's, doctorates in theology, right? Words about God, theologos, God and word, So, but in 2019, I got up every morning, it was so dark. I didn't even want to live. I didn't want to wake up. And I felt shattered. Everything. I felt like an atheist. I questioned everything I'd ever believed. It didn't feel like God existed, even though I'd prayed hours my whole life, every day of my life, kind of thing. And I just had to go back I had to go back to the basics of, well, even if there's no God, there is beauty. I've seen it. There is love. I've experienced it. There is creativity. There is generosity in this world. And I'm like going, so I can at least hold on to those things. And then I added the vulnerability and the honesty to sort of that set of core values: beauty, love, creativity, generativity or generosity, however you want to. And then honesty and vulnerability. And I just that kind of became the ground of what I wanted to build on. And of course, now I'm pastoring again. I'm teaching the Bible again and stuff like that. But in a way that has those things as the ground. I'm trying to be, those things are the things I want to bring forth, not just from a Christian faith tradition, but any faith tradition or no tradition. But those are the elemental sort of core ground values of how I'm trying to live now, I guess, or live into those things. And I feel like you are doing that. And I think that's why I resonated so deeply with just even that first night that I went to the workshop.
Thank you for that. Thank you. That's it. I don't know what my God's name is. I don't know what God looks like. I don't know if God has ever taken a form or if everything I've ever looked at is God. Right.
Right.
But the reality for me is I don't see the point in being here if I do not belong. I've never been able to feel a sense of will to live in a deep state of darkness and isolation. So my job is to keep myself connected, right? My job is, and in that, my strength is in creating places to connect people. Before the writing workshop, Casey, which is very wholesome and loving and wonderful, I was the founder of Kansas City Poetry Slam, and that's still going on, but I would get on a stage every Wednesday night, and man, we would get hammered and we would have an amazing time slamming poems. And, I charged $5 at the door, and I paid the winner $100, which changed people's lives. $100 when you walked in with no money is a lot of money, right? Yeah. The reality is that even in that environment, even when we were partying and it was chaotic and loud and in no way intentionally spiritual, I met some of the most incredible life-saving people in existence. And I watched people go from strangers to marriage partners. And I watched people save their own lives because I wanted a place to be and a stage and a microphone every Wednesday, right? And that's it. It was a very selfish endeavor, but it changed lives, including mine. And it funneled me towards my true purpose and meaning. And even as that evolves and takes shape over the years, I know that I have a responsibility to hold space for people who need it. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that for the rest of my life, because that's how I can contribute to the collective good.
That's beautiful. I love that. Well, I get lost with the time, and we're coming short. I don't know if you still do. I would love for you to close us out with one of your poems. Do you still have time? Are you on a really hard deadline?
No, I'm okay. I can do that.
Okay, cool. By the way, one of your videos is a poem that you did called Pomegranate. And I love the end. I want to encourage people to go to your website, which is give us the website. IamFrancesStory.com will be launched in the next 24 hours. I had you look at an old one, but yeah, IamFrancesStory.com. And a bunch of, you can see Frances performing her poems, and she's got a lot of videos on there. It's really cool. I'd encourage you to go there and check that out. And then she's got poetry books out. But anyway, I love the end of Pomegranate. We don't have time to do that, but yeah, share with us, close us out with one of your poems, and we'll let that sit with people as we close this interview.
Absolutely. This is a poem called Minutes, which it began as a prompt on writing my own eulogy, which I did as an exercise for an organization I work with, but also in tribute to quite a few queer friends who died too young, and their funerals were full of language and stories and identities that weren't true to who they were at all. So I never wanted anybody to be confused about who I am. When they ask you about my life, I want you to tell them that I made something out of nothing. I was born between a Bible and a rifle, blue-collar Americana, strict as hospital corners, heavy as King James scripture, turned words into wings and took flight to find others like me. I rode the train coast to coast solely for the sake of poetry. Drank sake from cough syrup cups, snorted cocaine off of pen caps, slept in turquoise jewels and wore ushankas in the summertime. I held swings hostage and chain smoked in bunk beds. I wrote poems to never would be lovers, threw relationships out with the pizza boxes. I recycled old flames. Broke my only loaf of bread with geniuses, broke bones during mischief, went broke on payday. Every moment was a gamble, and I was spectacular in my glory. I made ends meet at pawn shops, gave birth to great ideas on sticky tabletops, aborted well-paying jobs for the coal mines of creation. I slept on stolen time, backpack, knapsack, my treasure chest pillow, creaking back, crackling echo across the rise of dawn, smoking slow while tears rolled down my cheeks, weeping at the new day choir of color, exposing me as I age to loss. I miss every soul who ever lost their life to the idea that maybe tomorrow will be just the same as today. And today was a hard day. I never got any rest. I shared bar stools with missionaries, raised a toast to mortality, was taught to dance by men in 6-inch heels. I dove into midnight, resurfaced days later, adopted too many strays, shrieked unforgivable blasphemies at pedestrians. I nearly lost my life on a corporate detour, but they could never take my soul. I was royalty, who made my castles in shotgun studio apartments and dive bars, broke the spine of every fresh book to strike fear into the fair weather poets. Do not linger here unless you desire to make a home at the foot of a volcano. I twisted my tongue into adjectives, lathering every syllable with syntax. I apologized for vulnerability, for being born, being gone, being distant, being out, but I never apologized for the art. I bound my breasts on Monday morning, freed my femininity on Friday night, scraped together sentimental scraps to make presents on holidays. I rode bicycles and filed bankruptcy, ate chocolate in bed, fell in love in karaoke bars, made love in front of other people, grew homesick for cities I never visited but always dreamed of, dove palms first into both coasts' oceans in a week's time, twice looked up from a microphone to see 3,000 eyes, feared today as much as tomorrow, fought epic, merciless battles with partners whose names were tattooed down my arms. I immortalized their effect in ink. Permanent. My hesitation was as negotiable as my hair color, but I could not afford to risk forgetting that at least once in my lifetime, I had known profound, unconditional love. I took everything for granted. I doctored rejection letters with community gatherings, failure with forever trying again, addressed uncertainty with astrology. I sacrificed lunch hours for stanzas, exhausted my introvert with extrovert activities in hopes of finding relevance through publication. I blew my gas money on magic rocks and fine point pens, shared toothbrushes, suicidal thoughts, funeral pews, Christmas Eve, celebrated half birthdays, loathed matrimony, rituals, and obligation unless it came as a command in my dreams, and then in gratitude to the muse, I obeyed unconditionally. When they ask you about my life, I want you to tell them that I answered to an intuition that felt like a memory, a sense of urgency to make everything beautiful with the way of my words. I never intended to do any good. It was all a byproduct of chasing the whisper of a calling. Falling infatuation with telling the truth gave others permission to tell their too. I wore all the colors and lived in all the worlds, and there were none I liked better than the ones where I was loved. Love was the best part about my life. There was nothing better, and really nothing else worth mentioning. When they ask you about my life, I want you to tell them it was worth every minute.
Yay. I love that. Oh, my.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Whew. Patty Griffin once got on stage and she started to sing a song she'd written like 20 years ago. And then she was like, damn, that was written by a younger person.
Oh, I love Patty Griffin, though. Oh, my God. I love her.
Exquisite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had her on that 2019 year of my, I had her on repeat along with, who's the guy, Matt, that I Bank on the Funeral. It was an album that Matt Mason that came out in 2019.
Okay.
Rock album, Bank on the Funeral. He's going to be showing up here in Kansas City with Luke Bryant, opening for Luke Bryant. Matt this Matt Mason guy. So, but anyway, man, thanks so much for being on Spirituality Adventure.
I'll have to check him out.
This time with us. And I look forward to seeing you soon, like tomorrow.
Absolutely. Fred, thanks for having me. It's been a really great time to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures, and we'll see you next time. Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for listening all the way through on this episode. By the way, if you're not already a supporter, go to spiritualityadventures.com, sign up for one of our monthly supports, and you will receive our bonus content. You'll receive lots of interesting information about our guests. Many of our musicians will do special bonus songs and record a song. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe. Be sure and share any of the episodes that you like. And be sure and make comments if you like them as well. This helps us get Spirituality Adventures out there to more listeners, more watchers. So whatever platform you're using, subscribe, like, share, make comments, and go to our website, sign up for our team, and be a part of the team support. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.